Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked through the empty corridors of Research Station Alpha. The morning had been quiet, almost too quiet for his liking. He had been a Marine for 8 years now, and he knew when something felt wrong. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. 3 days ago, the Zephyrians had arrived on Kepler 442b for what Earth Command called the most important meeting in human history. These blue-skinned aliens with their crystal-like features had traveled across the galaxy to discuss peace between their two species. The war had been going on for 2 years, and everyone was tired of fighting. Jake checked his weapon and continued his patrol. The research station was huge, with many levels going deep into the ground. Scientists worked here studying the planet and trying to understand Zephyrian technology. Most of the researchers had been moved to safe areas while the peace talks happened. But some stayed to keep the important work going. The Zephyrian delegation had set up their quarters in the east wing of the station. Jake had seen them a few times during his patrols. They moved with grace, their blue skin shining under the artificial lights. Their leader, Ambassador Rel, seemed genuinely interested in making peace. Jake hoped the talks would work. He was tired of war. As he turned a corner near the communications center, Jake heard Dr. Peters talking to someone on the radio. The older scientist looked worried, which was not unusual. Dr. Peters always looked worried about something. But today felt different. "The energy readings are getting stronger," Dr. Peters was saying into his headset. "Something big is coming." Jake stopped walking. Energy readings meant ships. Big energy readings meant big ships. The Zephyrian peace delegation had only brought 3 small vessels. If more ships were coming, it could mean trouble. Before Jake could ask Dr. Peters what was happening, the world exploded around him. The first blast hit the communications tower outside the station. Jake felt the building shake as pieces of metal and concrete rained down from the ceiling. Emergency lights started flashing red, and alarms began screaming throughout the facility. Dr. Peters grabbed Jake's arm. "They're attacking!" "The Zephyrians are attacking." Jake pushed the scientist toward the emergency shelter. "Get to safety. Move." More explosions rocked the station. Jake could hear the sound of energy weapons firing outside. Through a window, he saw Zephyrian warships in the sky, their weapons lighting up the morning darkness. These were not the peaceful ships that had arrived 3 days ago. These were military vessels built for war. Jake spoke into his radio. "Command, this is Morrison. The station is under attack. Repeat, we are under attack." Static answered him. The communications tower was destroyed. Jake ran through the corridors as the station shook around him. Parts of the ceiling fell, and sparks flew from damaged electrical systems. He needed to find his squad and help with the evacuation. But first, he had to make sure all the civilians were safe. He reached the east wing where the Zephyrian delegation had been staying. Smoke filled the hallways, and emergency lighting made everything look red and dangerous. Jake called out, hoping to find survivors. "Hello, anyone here? We need to evacuate." No one answered. Jake moved carefully through the damaged corridors. The attack seemed to be focused on this area. Maybe the attacking Zephyrians wanted to kill their own peace delegation. Maybe this had all been a trap. As Jake moved deeper into the east wing, he heard something that made him stop. It was a sound he had never heard before, but somehow he knew what it was. Someone was crying. Someone very young. The sound came from behind a door marked with Zephyrian symbols. Jake tried to open it, but it was stuck. He kicked it hard, and it opened with a crash. Inside, he found a room filled with strange equipment and furniture that looked like it was made for aliens. The crying was louder now. Jake followed the sound to a corner of the room where he found something that looked like a large egg made of glass and metal. Inside the glass, he could see movement. Jake looked closer and felt his breath catch in his throat. Inside the strange container was a baby. Not a human baby, but a Zephyrian infant. The child had the same blue crystalline skin as the adult Zephyrians, but it was small and helpless. The baby was crying and reaching toward Jake with tiny hands. The container was damaged. Cracks ran through the glass, and some kind of blue liquid was leaking out. Jake realized this must be how Zephyrian babies lived before they could breathe normal air. The attack had damaged the life support system. Jake looked around the room for the baby's parents, but he found only destruction. Blast marks on the walls showed that energy weapons had been fired here. Blood, both red and blue, stained the floor. The Zephyrian delegation was gone, probably dead. Another explosion shook the building. Jake knew he had to get out soon or the whole structure would collapse. But he could not leave the baby to die. The infant looked at him with large, frightened eyes that seemed to glow with their own light. Jake had been trained to kill Zephyrians. For 2 years, these aliens had been his enemy, but looking at this helpless child, he saw no enemy. He saw only an innocent life that needed help. Jake carefully opened the damaged container. The baby's crying stopped as Jake gently lifted the small form. The infant was lighter than a human baby, and its skin felt warm and smooth like polished stone. Jake took off his military jacket and wrapped the child in it. "It's okay, little one," Jake said softly. "I've got you." The baby looked up at Jake and made a soft musical sound. Despite everything happening around them, Jake felt something strange in his chest. This tiny alien trusted him completely. More. Explosions echoed through the station. Jake knew the building would not stand much longer. He held the baby close to his chest and started running toward the emergency exits. Behind them, the East Wing began to collapse. Jake Morrison, United Earth Marine, ran through the burning station carrying his enemy's child. He did not know why he was doing this. He only knew that it was right. In his arms, the Zephyrian baby made soft sounds and gripped his shirt with tiny fingers. The real war was just beginning. But in that moment, something else was beginning too. Something that might be more powerful than all the weapons in the galaxy. Jake ran through the emergency tunnel carrying the Zephyrian baby. The tunnel led to Emergency Shelter 7, where civilians and wounded soldiers waited for evacuation ships. His boots splashed through puddles of water from broken pipes, and the lights flickered on and off. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with curious eyes. Jake found it strange how calm the infant seemed now. Maybe Zephyrian babies were different from human ones. Or maybe this little one was just brave. Jake reached the heavy metal door of the shelter and banged on it 3 times. Then twice. This was the code that told the people inside he was friendly. The door opened and Corporal Martinez looked out. "Morrison!" "Thank God you made it," Martinez said. Then he saw what Jake was carrying. "What the hell is that?" "A baby," Jake said simply. "Where's Dr. Carter?" Martinez stared at the blue-skinned infant but stepped aside to let Jake enter. The shelter was crowded with about 30 people. Some were scientists, some were Marines, and some were civilian workers from the station. Most of them looked scared and tired. Dr. Lisa Carter was in the corner treating a wounded soldier. She was the colony's top expert on alien biology. If anyone could help the baby, it would be her. Lisa had studied Zephyrians for 3 years and knew more about their bodies than any other human. "Lisa," Jake called out, "I need your help." "Doctor." Carter looked up from bandaging the soldier's arm. When she saw Jake holding the alien baby, her eyes went wide. She quickly finished with the wounded man and hurried over. "Where did you find this child?" she asked, already reaching for her medical scanner. "In the Zephyrian quarters," Jake replied. "The parents are gone. The life support system was damaged." Lisa ran her scanner over the baby. The device beeped softly as it read the infant's vital signs. "Amazing," she whispered. "This child is healthy, but it's going to need special care to survive in our environment." The baby reached up and touched Jake's face with tiny fingers. The skin felt warm and smooth. Jake found himself smiling despite the terrible situation around them. "What do we call it?" Jake asked. Lisa studied the scanner readings. "Based on the bone structure, I think it's a female." "In Zephyrian language, Kira means star. How about that?" "Kira," Jake repeated. The baby made a soft musical sound when she heard the name. "I think she likes it." Captain Rogers, the shelter commander, walked over to see what was happening. He was a tough man who had fought in many battles, but when he saw the alien baby, his expression softened. Morrison, what are you planning to do with that child? Rogers asked. Protect her, Jake answered without thinking. Son, we're in the middle of a war zone. We can barely protect ourselves. Before Jake could respond, the shelter's radio crackled to life. The voice speaking was not human. It was the strange, musical language of the Zephyrians, but the automatic translator made the words clear to everyone. Attention, human survivors, the alien voice said. We know you have taken something that belongs to us. Return the offspring of Counselor Neth immediately, or face total destruction. The shelter fell silent. Everyone stared at the baby in Jake's arms. Little Kira looked back at them with innocent eyes, not understanding that she was the center of a deadly situation. Darkarter grabbed Jake's arm. Did you hear that? She's not just any baby. She's the daughter of Counselor Neth. Jake remembered hearing that name during the peace talks. Counselor Neth had been one of the strongest voices for peace between humans and Zephyrians. He had many followers who believed the war should end. If Neth is dead, Lisa continued, and they want to kill his daughter, it means the war faction has taken control. They're eliminating anyone who might challenge them later. The radio spoke again. You have 1 hour to bring the child to the main landing pad. If you refuse, we will begin systematic destruction of all human settlements on this planet. Captain. Rogers paced back and forth. We can't risk 30 lives for one alien baby, even if she is important. She's not just important, Jake said. She's innocent. The whole planet is at stake, Morrison. Jake looked down at Kira. She was playing with a button on his shirt, making tiny happy sounds. She trusted him completely. She had no idea that people wanted her dead just because of who her father was. Captain, Dr. Carter said suddenly, I'm getting reports on the emergency frequency. The Zephyrian attack isn't just happening here. They hit 3 other human colonies at the same time. But something strange is happening. She adjusted the radio to pick up long-range signals. Voices crackled through the static, both human and Zephyrian. Some Zephyrian ships are refusing to attack civilians, one voice reported. They're saying something about the child who must. Live, another voice came through. Zephyrian peace faction ships are moving to intercept their own military. Civil war has broken out in their fleet. Jake felt his heart beat faster. They're fighting each other over Kira. Lisa nodded. Counselor Neth must have had more supporters than the war faction realized. News about his daughter being alive could be spreading through their forces. Captain Rogers stopped pacing. Are you saying this baby could end the war? Or make it much worse, Lisa replied. If the war faction gets her, they'll kill any hope of peace. But if she lives, she might unite the peace supporters. The radio crackled again. This time the voice was human. Emergency evacuation ships are approaching the planet, but Zephyrian forces are blocking them. Repeat, evacuation is not possible at this time. Jake realized they were trapped. No ships could reach them, and the Zephyrians would not stop hunting for Kira. He looked around the shelter at the frightened faces of the other survivors. We can't stay here, Jake said. And we can't give her to them. Then what do you suggest? Captain Rogers asked. Jake thought about the wilderness beyond the research station. It was dangerous, full of wild animals and harsh weather. But it was also huge, with many places to hide. We run, Jake said. We take Kira and disappear into the wild. Make them hunt for us. That's suicide, Morrison. Jake looked down at the baby again. Kira was falling asleep in his arms, making soft breathing sounds. She looked so peaceful, so trusting. Maybe, Jake said, but it's better than murder. 3 weeks had passed since Jake and his group escaped into the wilderness of Kepler 442b. The planet's forests were thick and dangerous, but they provided good hiding places from the Zephyrian. Search parties that flew overhead every day. Jake's group had grown smaller. Only 8 people remained from the original 15 who had left the shelter with him. Some had been too scared to continue and turned back. Others had been injured and could not keep up with the hard pace Jake set through the rough terrain. Now, the group consisted of Jake, Dr. Lisa Carter, Corporal Martinez, Two other Marines named Buck and Stevens, a communications expert called Tony, and two civilian scientists. They moved mostly at night and hid during the day in caves or thick forest areas. Baby Kira had changed during their time in the wild. She was bigger now and could sit up by herself. Her blue skin seemed brighter, and strange patterns were starting to appear on her arms and face. Dr. Carter said this was normal for Zephyrian children as they grew. What amazed everyone was how much Kira loved being with humans. She would reach for Jake whenever she saw him and made happy sounds when Lisa talked to her. The baby had learned to recognize each person in the group and would smile when they came near her. "She's bonding with us," Lisa explained one evening as they sat around a small fire hidden deep in a cave. Zephyrian children form strong emotional connections with whoever cares for them in their first months of life. Jake held Kira on his lap while she played with a piece of shiny metal Tony had found. The baby was fascinated by anything that reflected light. She would stare at it for long periods and make soft musical sounds. "Look at these patterns on her skin," Lisa said, pointing to the faint lines that had appeared on Kira's arms. "They're getting more complex every day? What do they mean?" Jake asked. "I think they're bonding marks. In my research, I read that young Zephyrians develop these patterns when they form deep emotional connections. Usually it only happens with their biological parents." Corporal Martinez looked worried. "Are you saying this baby thinks we're her family now?" "Something like that," Lisa replied. "These marks show she trusts us completely. To her, we are her people." Jake felt something warm in his chest when he heard this. Over the past 3 weeks, he had grown to love little Kira like she was his own daughter. He fed her, protected her, and sang to her when she had trouble sleeping. The thought that she considered him family made him feel proud and scared at the same time. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of aircraft engines overhead. Everyone froze as bright lights swept through the forest outside their cave. The search was getting closer. "They're using new scanners," Tony whispered as he listened to his portable radio. "I'm picking up their communications. They're looking for life signs, not just visual contact." Jake held Kira closer. The baby seemed to sense the danger and stayed very quiet. Over the weeks, she had learned when to be silent without anyone. Teaching her, the searchlights moved away, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they were found. The Zephyrians were determined to catch them. 2 days later, their worst fears came true. Kira became very sick. Jake woke up one morning to find the baby burning with fever. Her usually bright blue skin had turned dark, and she was having trouble breathing. She cried weakly and would not eat or drink anything. "I don't know what's wrong," Lisa said, her voice full of worry. "This isn't like any human illness. I don't have the right medicines for Zephyrian biology." Jake watched helplessly as Kira got sicker. Her breathing became shallow, and the beautiful patterns on her skin started to fade. He had survived battles, explosions, and enemy attacks, but watching this tiny child suffer was the hardest thing he had ever experienced. "There has to be something we can do," Jake said desperately. Lisa checked her medical supplies again. "I've tried everything I have. Her body chemistry is too different from ours. She needs Zephyrian medicine." "Then we'll find some," Jake declared. "Jake, be realistic. The only Zephyrians on this planet are trying to kill us." But Jake was not ready to give up. He spent that night holding Kira, trying to keep her warm. The baby's fever was so high that Jake could feel the heat through her skin. She was barely conscious and made tiny whimpering sounds that broke his heart. Jake did the only thing he could think of. He started singing to her. Old songs his mother had sung to him when he was little. Military marching songs, even made-up lullabies with nonsense words. He sang quietly through the night, holding Kira against his chest. Something amazing happened. When Jake sang, Kira's breathing got a little better. When he stopped, she got worse again. So Jake kept singing, hour after hour, his voice getting rough and tired. By morning, something incredible had occurred. Kira's fever had broken. Her skin was returning to its normal bright blue color, and the patterns were becoming visible again. She opened her eyes and looked at Jake with recognition and love. "How is this possible?" Lisa asked in amazement as She scanned the baby with her medical equipment. I don't know, Jake replied, exhausted but happy. Maybe human contact helps Zephyrian healing. Lisa studied her scanner readings carefully. Jake, look at this. The patterns on her skin have changed. They're much more complex now, and they seem to match your vocal patterns from when you were singing. Jake looked at the delicate lines and swirls covering Kira's arms and face. They were beautiful, like living artwork that moved and shifted as she breathed. What does it mean? He asked. I think it means she's bonded with you on a level I've never seen before. These patterns show that she considers you her true family. In Zephyrian culture, this kind of bonding is considered sacred. Meanwhile, Tony was listening to his radio again. His face looked troubled as he heard the latest communications. Jake, you need to hear this, Tony said. The story about you and Kira is spreading. Both human and Zephyrian forces are talking about the human soldier who saved an enemy child. Some Zephyrians are starting to question whether this war is right. Jake realized that their flight through the wilderness had become something bigger than just survival. They were carrying hope with them in the form of a tiny blue baby who trusted humans with her life. The first snow of winter fell on Kepler 442b as Jake and his group reached the abandoned mining complex in the mountains. The old facility had been built by human colonists years ago, but was left empty when better mining sites were found. Now, it would serve as their shelter from the coming cold season. Jake carried Kira through the empty corridors while the others checked the building for safety. The baby was almost 4 months old now and had grown much larger. She could crawl and make sounds that almost seemed like words. The bonding patterns on her skin had become so complex that they looked like beautiful tattoos covering her arms and face. This place will work, Corporal Martinez said as he returned from checking the upper levels. The structure is solid and there are deep tunnels that go far underground. If we get attacked, we can retreat into the mine shafts. Dr. Carter set up her medical equipment in what used to be the facility's laboratory. Tony worked on getting their communications gear running. Again, they had been cut off from outside contact for 2 weeks, and everyone wanted to know what was happening in the war. Buck and Stevens, the 2 Marines, took turns watching for enemy aircraft while Jake helped make the place livable. They found old blankets, tools, and even some canned food that the previous miners had left behind. That evening, Tony finally got the radio working. What they heard made everyone gather around the communications desk. This is Admiral Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet, came a voice through the static. All human forces be advised that a joint peace mission is being prepared. Moderate Zephyrian leaders have contacted us about ending this war. The symbol of hope they mention is a human soldier protecting a Zephyrian child. If this soldier can hear this message, know that you have given both our species something to believe in. Jake felt his heart beat faster. He looked down at Kira, who was playing with his dog tags and making happy baby sounds. That's you they're talking about, Lisa said with amazement. You've become famous across the galaxy. But their moment of hope was shattered by Tony's grim expression as he continued, listening to other radio channels. Jake, there's bad news too, Tony said. Commander Vex of the Zephyrian War faction has sworn to find and kill Kira before any peace can happen. He's bringing his entire battle fleet to this planet. Jake felt cold fear in his stomach. Commander. Vex was known throughout human space as a brutal warrior who showed no mercy to his enemies. If Vex was coming personally, it meant the war faction was desperate to stop the peace movement. 3 days later, their worst fears came true. Jake was teaching Kira to walk in the main corridor when the building's old emergency alarm started. Ringing, Stevens ran in from his watchpost, his face pale with fear. 30 Zephyrian ships just entered the atmosphere, Stevens reported. They're heading straight for us. Jake scooped up Kira and ran to the observation window. In the distance, he could see the sleek forms of enemy warships approaching through the clouds. At the front was a massive command vessel that could only belong to Commander Vex. How did they find us? Martinez asked. It doesn't matter now, Jake replied. We need to get to the deep tunnels. Lisa grabbed her medical supplies while Tony tried to save their communication equipment. But before they could retreat, a voice boomed from speakers mounted on the approaching ships. "Human soldiers," the voice said in perfect English. "I am Commander Vex of the Zephyrian Military Command. You have something that belongs to our people. Surrender the offspring of the traitor Neth, and you will be allowed to live." Jake held Kira tighter. The baby seemed to sense the danger and clung to his shirt with tiny hands. "You have 1 hour to bring the child to the main entrance," Vex continued. "If you refuse, I will destroy this facility and everything in it. There will be no mercy for those who defy the rightful order." The ships landed in a circle around the mining complex. Jake could see hundreds of Zephyrian soldiers taking positions. They had energy weapons, flying vehicles, and equipment that could probably blast through the mountain itself. Captain Rogers would have surrendered by now, Jake thought. Any reasonable military commander would have given up faced with such overwhelming force. But Jake was not thinking like a soldier anymore. He was thinking like a father protecting his child. "We can't fight them all," Martina said, stating the obvious. "We don't have to fight them all," Jake replied. "We just have to hold them off long enough." Long enough for what? Jake was already moving toward the mining equipment storage area. Long enough for that Joint Peace Fleet Admiral Hayes mentioned to get here. For the next hour, Jake and his team prepared for the impossible. They used the old mining explosives to create traps in the tunnels. They set up the heavy drilling equipment as weapons. They turned the abandoned facility into a fortress. Lisa took Kira to the deepest part of the mine, where thick rock walls would protect her from energy weapons. The baby seemed to understand that something important was happening. She stayed quiet and watched everything with her large, intelligent eyes. When the hour was up, Commander Vex's voice echoed through the facility again. "Your time has ended, humans. Since you choose death over wisdom, death you shall have." The attack began with a massive energy blast that shook the entire mountain. Jake felt pieces of rock fall from the ceiling as he ran to his position near the main entrance. Through the smoke and debris, he could see Zephyrian soldiers advancing. "Here they come!" Stevens shouted. Jake activated the first mining explosive. The blast brought down part of the tunnel roof, blocking the main passage. But the Zephyrians had other ways in. They started cutting through walls with their energy weapons. The battle that followed was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. He and his small team fought with desperation born of love. Every tunnel became a battlefield. Every room was defended with everything they had. Jake used the mining drill like a giant weapon, smashing through Zephyrian battle armor. Martinez threw grenades made from mining explosives. Buck and Stevens fought back to back, their human weapons somehow holding off advanced alien technology. For 6 hours, 8 humans held off hundreds of Zephyrian warriors. They gave ground slowly, retreating deeper into the mine, but they never stopped fighting. Jake could hear Kira crying in the distance. The sound gave him strength he didn't know he had. This tiny alien child trusted him to protect her, and he would not let her down. As their ammunition ran low, and the Zephyrians prepared for their final assault, Jake heard something that made his heart leap, the sound of engines in the sky. Different engines, human engines mixed with Zephyrian ones. Help had finally arrived. The joint fleet that appeared in the sky above the mining complex was a sight Jake had never expected to see. Human warships flew alongside Zephyrian vessels, their weapons aimed at Commander Vex's forces on the ground. The impossible had happened. Former enemies were working together. Jake crawled through the rubble of the tunnel he had been defending. His body was covered in cuts and burns from the 6-hour battle. His rifle was empty and he had only 1 grenade left. But he was alive, and somewhere in the deep tunnels, Kira was safe. A voice boomed across the battlefield, speaking both in English and the musical language of the Zephyrians. "Commander Vex, this is Admiral Kate Rogers of the Earth Defense Force and Counselor Thane of the Zephyrian Peace Coalition. You will cease your attack immediately and withdraw your forces." Jake could hear Vex's angry response echoing from his command ship. "You work with these humans against your own people, Thane. You are the traitor now." "The only traitor here is you, Vex," came Thane's reply. You murdered Counselor Neth and started this war. The High Council has voted. You are relieved of command. The shooting stopped. Jake used the sudden silence to make his way deeper into the mine toward where Lisa was hiding with Kira. He found them in a small chamber far underground, surrounded by broken rocks but safe. Kira reached for Jake as soon as she saw him. Despite all the noise and danger, the baby smiled when he picked her up. The bonding patterns on her skin were glowing softly in the dim light of Lisa's emergency lamp. "Is it over?" Lisa asked Dot before Jake could answer. They heard footsteps in the tunnel. Jake grabbed his last grenade, ready to make a final stand. But the voice that called out was human, Sergeant Morrison. "This is Captain Wells of the Earth Defense Force. Are you and the child safe?" Jake felt relief flood through his body. "We're here. We're safe." Two soldiers appeared in the chamber, followed by a tall woman in an admiral's uniform. Jake recognized her from news broadcasts. This was Admiral Kate Rogers, one of the most respected officers in human space. "Sergeant Morrison," the admiral said, "you've caused quite a stir across the galaxy." Jake stood at attention as best he could while holding Kira. The baby looked curiously at the new people but stayed calm in Jake's arms. "I was just doing my duty, ma'am," Admiral Rogers smiled. "Your duty was to your fellow humans, Sergeant." "What you did went far beyond duty," a new voice spoke from the tunnel entrance. A tall Zephyrian with silver markings on his blue skin walked into the chamber. This had to be Counselor Thane. Jake tensed, but the alien raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "May I see the child?" Thane asked in careful English. Jake looked at Admiral Rogers, who nodded. Slowly, Jake turned so Thane could see Kira. The Zephyrian's eyes widened when he saw the complex bonding patterns covering the baby's skin. "Incredible," Thane whispered. "She has bonded with you as deeply as any Zephyrian parent. These markings show complete trust and love." Kira looked at Thane and made soft musical sounds. She was not afraid of him, but she stayed close to Jake. "She is the daughter of my dear friend Counselor Neth," Thane continued. "He died believing that humans and Zephyrians could live in peace. His daughter has proven him right." Over the next few hours, Jake learned what had happened while they were hiding in the wilderness. The story of the human soldier protecting an alien baby had spread across both civilizations. Many Zephyrians had begun to question the war when they heard about Jake's sacrifice. Peace movements had started on both sides. Admiral Rogers and Counselor Thane had been working in secret to end the fighting. But they needed something to convince their people that peace was possible. Jake and Kira had given them that proof. "Your actions saved more than one child's life," Admiral Rogers told Jake. "You saved both our species from years more of war." But now came the hardest part. Kira had to be returned to her own people. The goodbye took place on the landing field outside the mining complex. Jake held Kira one last time, trying to memorize every detail of her face. She was walking now and could say a few words in both human and Zephyrian languages. "Papa Jake," she said, using the name she had learned for him. The bonding patterns on her skin glowed brighter when she spoke. Jake felt tears in his eyes. "I'm going to miss you, little star." Counselor Thane knelt beside them. "The child will never forget you," he said gently. "And neither will our people. She will grow up knowing that a human risked everything to save her." Kira seemed to understand that something was changing. She clung to Jake's neck and made sad sounds, but when Thane reached for her, she went to him without crying. Even at her young age, she seemed to know this was right. As Jake watched the Zephyrian ships take off with Kira aboard, he felt empty but also proud. He had done something that mattered. He had saved an innocent life and maybe helped end the war. 5 years passed. Jake was no longer a Marine sergeant. He had been promoted many times and was now Ambassador Jake Morrison, working for the new Interspecies Council that governed relations between humans and Zephyrians. The peace had held. There were still problems and disagreements, but both species had learned to talk instead of fight. The Morrison Doctrine, as historians called it, had become the foundation of interspecies law. It stated that the measure of any civilization was how it treated the most vulnerable members of all species. On the 5th anniversary of the rescue, Jake stood in the new council chambers on Earth. He was older now, with gray in his hair, but he still remembered every detail of those desperate weeks in the wilderness. The doors opened, and a young Zephyrian walked in. She was taller now and could speak perfect English, but Jake recognized her immediately. The bonding patterns on her skin were still there, fainter now, but still visible. "Hello, Papa Jake," Counselor Kira said with a smile. Jake felt his heart fill with joy. The frightened baby he had saved was now a powerful voice for peace between the species. She had grown up to become everything her father had hoped for. "Hello, little star," Jake replied, using her old nickname. Kira laughed, the same musical sound she had made as a baby. "I'm not so little anymore." They embraced, and Jake saw that some of the other council members had tears in their eyes. This moment represented everything they had worked for. A human and a Zephyrian, bound together by love instead of separated by war. As Kira took her place at the council table, Jake thought about how one small act of kindness had changed the galaxy. He had saved one alien child, and in doing so, he had saved them all. The future was bright with possibilities that neither species could achieve alone. And it all started with a soldier who chose love over fear in the darkest hour of war.